building's on twice.
It'll be on twice.
And this one,
So
maybe different angles.
It's gone.
Try and get one. But then you get 3 pops. Okay, you know.
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
we are going to.
Do we do it all by AI?
Should go get a book.
We went and got. Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We're just waiting for the webcast lag to finish. So remind councillors and all of those present that your image and what you say may be broadcast live to the public. So please be mindful of your actions and your comments. Should avoid making statements that might defame or offend, and note that a recording of this meeting will be retained online and in council's archives. Please turn off your mobile phones or switch them to silent. Filming and photography are not permitted in the meeting. Anybody observed to be filming the meeting may be asked to leave. I now declare the meeting open at 5:02 p.m. Two requests have been received to attend by audio-visual link, one from Councillor Wright and one by Councillor Mooland, in accordance with clause 6.21 of the Code of Meeting Practice. I move that the committee approves the request by Councillors Mooland and Wright to attend the Economic Development Committee meeting on the 3rd of June 2025 at 5 p.m. by audio-visual link, because they are unable to attend in person due to personal reasons. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Smith. With that motion, all those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand and keep it raised. Unanimous.
I've got no objection to the substance of the motion, but I think there's some uncertainty about whether the chair can actually move a motion even if procedural.
Uncertainty is correct. We'll sort it out.
Can we?
Yeah.
Investigate that.
I declare the motion carried. A warm welcome to everybody in attendance and those watching along at home. Acknowledge the traditional owners, traditional custodians of the land on which we live, work and play, and pay our respects to Darkinjung country and elders past and present. We recognise the continued connection to these lands and waterways and extend this acknowledgement to the homelands and stories of those who have also called this place home. We recognise our future leaders and the shared responsibility to care for and protect our place and people. Apologies. We've got an apology from Councillor McQuaid and we just received one from Councillor McGregor. We also have an apology from Councillor McKenna, who was the original apology, and Councillor Wright, who is the alternate, is attending tonight's meeting as a member. Any other apologies? No more received.
I just got an answer for you. Yes, the check-in.
Well, I don't know if that's correct. Anyway, I'll talk to you.
We'll sort it later.
Check with Marissa.
I know.
I've always happened before. Vote on issue.
Okay, disclosures of interest. I now ask committee members to disclose any conflict of interest they have in any of the items in tonight's agenda. Firstly, myself, I confirm that I have no conflicts of interest. Councillor Smith. Councillor Mooland. Up there on the end. Take yourself off mute. Councillor McGregor is apology. Councillor Neal.
I have no conflict.
Councillor Wright.
Nothing to declare, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Mooland off mute yet? Yep. Come back on.
Mr. Chair, just a matter of protocol. Can I just confirm? I think councillors online need to be visible. Otherwise they're considered not present at the time. Yeah. I don't know whether that affects quorum.
It's. Same with Helen.
No, I don't think so.
You back on?
Yeah.
Okay, councillor Moreland, any disclosure of interest? Shaking his head. No,
He's on mute.
you're on mute. Can you come off mute? And you can't come off mute. You should
Councillor
have
Moore, could you just type it in the chat?
Okay.
Is that permissible, Mr. Chair?
Sorry, who was that? Councillor Wright, was it?
Yeah, I think Councillor Mullen might be in a place where he can't speak. Perhaps he could just type, he has no conflict to declare in the chat.
He's conducting 2 meetings at the station.
Yes, councillor Moreland, if you could place your answer in the chat, please. Thank you. And why do you keep cutting out?
It depends on your interpretation of 11.5 of the meeting procedure. Look,
When it comes back, we'll confirm all of that. Confirmation of the previous minutes. I now call on remover for the recommendation as the motion. Previous minutes. Who was at the meeting? Not you, that's right.
I was at the meeting, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to move those minutes.
Thank you, councillor Wright. I'll second it. I'll second that. Okay. Any other discussion? Councillor Neil, did you have a question about it? The minutes, or was that the previous?
no, that was the previous.
Previous, okay. I'll put the motion. All those voting in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillor McNamara, Councillor Smith, Councillor Wright. Moreland is still not back on. Councillor Neil.
I didn't because I was
Understand. Okay, 1, 2, 3,
I'm here, I'm just not.
No,
not the previous one.
questioning whether we have a quorum.
Yeah,
Yes, 4.
there's more than disappears.
Yeah. The 4, that's fine. I declare the motion is carried. Item 1.4, items resolved by exception. 1.5 is presentation by Transport for New South Wales. That's starred. The visitor accommodation,
I'd like to start that.
that's a tick. 1.7, which is the food manufacturing.
Presentation.
It's just a report.
There's a further report coming.
We'll leave that in the non-starred industries into schools pilot project. Not starred. Nighttime economy action plan.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Progressing the Warnervale Business Precinct standing item. There's a tick. And the Central Coast Air Show.
I think we can discuss that, but in particular why it's in confidential.
Yes. So that's a tick. So at the moment, 1.7 and 1.8. 1.7 and 1.8. Have a mover for those two, please. Councillor Wright. Seconder. Councillor Neil. Any discussion? No. I now put that motion. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands. Unanimous. Declare that motion carried. Okay. So item 1.5, presentation for Transport for New South Wales, Smart Central Coast Blueprint. I invite Mel Smith, Director of Community and Recreational Services, to speak to the report.
Chair. I will invite our guests who are here to present to us. So Selden Coventry, and Rory Brown, who are going to present the Smart Central Coast program.
Thank you. Just confirming this will be just a verbal presentation. There's no online presentation.
No, there's a handout.
Correct. Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to come in and speak to the Economic Development Committee. My name is Rory Brown. I'm the Acting Executive Director of the Smart Places team. We are a team that is within Transport South Wales, but I do want to state up front that our area of expertise that we look at is we think about that role of smart technology, of digital and data tools, and how that can support the outcomes of places, of towns, of precincts, and indeed for council. I'm not going to speak to you about things of work that we have been doing, working with council over the last couple of years, looking at answering the question, what role might smart technology and digital data, as I've mentioned, have, and how can that support council's ambitions, and how can that support the broader community for the Central Coast. Firstly, a little bit of background for you. We received a small amount of funding originally from the Department of Planning. We are now the Department of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure to do this piece of work. We were asked to do this piece of work because it is we're in a fairly unique position in terms of the expertise that we bring, thinking about this role of smart technology. And we've done similar pieces of work before, including for a number of Western Sydney councils and Parramatta Council. And I will talk a little bit about how this can be utilised. The original question coming from the Central Coast Strategy was, is there a need for intervention beyond what the private sector might be already doing within investment for digital connectivity for the region? And simply what I mean by that is there going to be sufficient connectivity for the region, for its ambitions, to meet the needs of businesses, meet the needs of education, to meet the needs of the community? Do we have the connectivity? Is the mobile coverage there? Are there things like the fibre backbone to give that sort of high-speed data capacity to allow businesses to grow? That was our original intention of the work. We were able to expand that and broaden the question to ask not only about the digital connectivity, but also about this role for smart technology. If you're wondering about smart technology, sometimes people think about smart cities, but it's basically any type of technology you might put in that public domain that could support something. So everything thinking about sort of smart parking, I would include things like EV charging. If you want to do measure the air quality, obviously CCTV is well known, or safety outcomes and so forth. So those are some of the things. So back in 2023, we were able to get this funding and did quite a significant analysis, firstly on that digital connectivity challenges, which we call the Digital Baseline Report. And the work that we did for this region was actually quite groundbreaking in terms of the analysis and the depth that we looked at. We were asking questions about how the region is going to develop over the next 5 years, both in terms of population growth, housing, job changes, and so on and so forth, and asking, is there enough connectivity? Will the private sector deploy that out? So when I talk about private sector, I'm thinking about the mobile networks, thinking about NBN and so forth. And indeed, we collated over 200 different data layers. And we think this work was actually quite unique within an Australian context. And it's a model indeed that we will utilise going forward. The first thing I want to say is that analysis allowed us to answer one of the core questions. Is pleasingly is that by and large, the investment from the private sector is actually going to meet the needs for the region from a digital connectivity perspective. Now, this is not to say that there won't be things like black spots if you're driving along the road and you're on a call and that call drops out, but by and large, it's going to be met. And so that was one of the sort of pleasing results. The next thing we did was we spent a lot of time up here. We engaged with the community. We've engaged with research and academia, with local businesses, both small business and large business. But we're asking the questions, what would you be looking for in terms of technology in that public domain to support whether it's that kind of jobs growth, economic development, safety, and so on and so forth. And from that engagement, from the research that we're doing, we developed something called the Smart Central Coast program. And we then took that down and developed it into a public-facing document, which we call the Smart Central Coast Blueprint. And so my ask specifically for Council today is we are seeking support from you to publish this document on the Transport for New South Wales, or our subset of Transport for New South Wales website, as basically a guiding document that would be there, that can be referenced for council, could be referenced for community when questions are being asked about, again, this role of smart technology within the public domain. Now, I want to be clear that publication of that document, it's not the intent to be signing up either state government or indeed council to require to do work or require to put funding in, but it's more should be seen and thought of as a strategic vision or a guiding light that can be used in council's work at a future time if council sees the benefit of that. I mentioned we've done work similarly with Western Sydney, and we've done work with Parramatta, and I want to give you a couple of examples of how they have actually used this similar documentation. We've done this program of work with them and published. So in Parramatta's council's case, they're currently utilising the Smart Central Coast Plan, is what the, sorry, not Smart Central Coast, Smart Central River City documentation to support some of the feedback into planning processes that are currently happening within their particular area, including planning processes around transport infrastructure. If I give an example of Western Sydney, some of you may be aware that Bradfield Development Authority, which is developing the new town of Bradfield, recently signed quite a significant agreement with two digital connectivity companies, one called Superloop and one called Wi-Fi, to help build in this digital infrastructure as the city comes up from the ground. So that's an example of them being able to reference work that we had done to talk about the role that this would play, put it into business cases, putting it into planning documents, and actually move forward from a construction perspective. So there are really practical examples. But that, whilst there's those, there's also simple things in terms of I already know council's doing some great stuff. I have seen the smart parking. I know that you've got funding support, the use of AI in planning. And again, having a potential guiding light document out there to be referenced could support further work, could support further grant applications as an example, but it's not intended to be a commitment, but it's intended to be that sort of guide and framing for the future point. So that's what I wanted to speak about today, the Smart Central Coast Blueprint. Having done sort of 2 years of work with council, with the community here, we feel very confident in the work that we've done. We feel very confident in what it can achieve. And we're going through the process seeking to get the appropriate support. I would say very clearly, we don't want to publish anything if council and yourselves felt that this wasn't appropriate, if it wasn't the right time. Albeit we've done this work and we think it can provide that opportunity. And I'm happy to take questions, notwithstanding that with 2 years of work and significant documentation, a limited time speaking to you, I haven't necessarily gone into lots of details, but happy to take specific questions that you have.
We're in a bit of difficulty, well, I am. The only thing I've received is that. I haven't actually seen the document.
That's correct. So one of the challenges that we were just trying to work through on this particular piece is the document itself is not a public-facing document at this point in time, and we did understand that if it went through the process, it would become public through your reporting of this particular session, and so we were just conscious that we didn't necessarily want to have that.
The difficulty is we can't really endorse something we haven't seen.
When do you think we'll get to look at it?
The document is available. We've finalised it, and we had the opportunity to bring that to the executive branch. I think it was last week, and speak to that. We're more than comfortable to be able to share that with you and for you to review it and have a look at it and see what it speaks to. I think we just didn't want to create a situation where it became public and you came back and said we reviewed this and actually we don't think it's appropriate at this point in
I'd
time.
like to move that we defer this matter until we actually review.
Well, we're not endorsing anything tonight. There's no recommendations or anything here,
That's
but
what
I
I'm
agree.
saying. Yeah, I'd like to move that way because, and I think also really to try and shadow box and ask you questions about a document we haven't seen would be, I think, waste of our time and yours. It may well be a very valuable document, but we just don't know, and I don't think we can really take it any further.
Yeah. Councillor Smith.
Hi, so just a couple of questions. And I'd have to say, when I saw this on the agenda, I thought we were going to get a presentation about how smart technology was helping to manage traffic and transport. But it seems to me your presentation is largely around high-speed internet and digital connectivity. Is that correct? I guess, is that the takeaway message here?
The high-speed internet and digital connectivity was a part of that, and we broadened it out. Absolutely, so I think smart technology can have a role to play in managing transport. Regardless, though, of the document that we produce is to speak more broadly. And again, whilst I sit within transport as a division, when we think and speak about smart places, we think of it and speak of it more holistically in terms of the different roles that it can impact within a community.
So I guess, so just really interested in this area, but very cautious about it as well, because I know there's been a huge community backlash to the idea of smart cities. And I wouldn't want to sort of be seen to jumping straight into it, but I'm also aware that lots of cities are doing great things with technology. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a while since I looked at it, but Auckland is kind of renowned for its smart technology. So is that the conversation that you guys are having with our council and our staff about the applications, or is it just about the capacity? I guess I'm interested to know how we might be looking at applying the smart technology rather than just having it in place.
It is more broadly around how the role of smart technology can support a particular outcome. And I think, if I may, I've been within this space for a bit over 5 years, and I fully understand and appreciate your comments around smart cities in some areas can be seen quite negative.
And I'm not suggesting that, I'm just reflecting on the commentary.
I think it's a very important question to be able to address. And we've done a lot of work to try and sort of demystify or people's concerns. For instance, we've done projects looking at transparency, whereby how can you have a piece of technology, let's say it's a CCTV, and someone walks past that, how would they be able to know what that camera is actually?
We've got them all over the Central Coast already.
It's not that you haven't got them, but it's about that ability to be transparent with the community for them to be able to sort of, how can they easily ask a question and kind of say, what is the information that's being captured and how is it being utilized, as an example. So we've done work on digital transparency. We've also done a lot of work looking at digital equity, because we see challenges within community where there's definitely cohorts that are very comfortable, very happy using technology, are confident, but then there are cohorts that aren't. So we've done programs, for instance, with Western Sydney, by using libraries as an example, as a place to help people get digital upskilled and other kinds of facilities. So the document itself speaks sort of quite broadly. I think it's always important we come back and say, you don't use technology for the sake of technology, you use technology as a support for a particular outcome that you want to achieve. And it's that role of the technology and that ability to be confident to apply it and apply the data and information coming from it is sort of what we try and set out in the blueprint.
Could I just ask a question, if that's okay, Chair? I was interested to hear, obviously, that you've done a lot of, I guess, consultation, discussions, etc., with business, which is as it should be. But I'm wondering as well whether part of your project actually spoke to or engaged with some of the sort of larger, for example, not-for-profit organisations on the coast, and even some of the, the government agencies, hospitals, whatever it might be, to sort of have that as part of the mix of your, of your findings and all the rest of it.
We did. And I didn't speak specifically to this, but the part of the governance that we had set up, we sought to have representation from sort of those wider stakeholders, some of that you've mentioned, including the local health districts.
Yeah.
I think we had we obviously had the parts of Transport for New South Wales, which deal with the additional parts of transport. New South Wales at that time, as well as yourselves, universities. I'm just going to check with my colleague Selden. Was there any?
Sorry, Regional New South Wales, the university and the Gosford campus.
And
And
was any not-for-profits?
we did speak to Jack and John, like Aboriginal Land Council, but
This is New South Wales.
yeah, business stuff.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I just wanted to sort of get a bit more of a feel for who you'd actually engaged in the process.
Yes, yeah, no, we did try to make sure that we had a wide representation.
Thank you.
Rory, when the document does come out and we look at it, how flexible are you with updates, considering how quick this area changes?
The document itself is structured in language that I think is sufficiently open-ended. Again, it's not at the level that it's directive to kind of say you must use technology X or Y. It's more, and I'll just give you an example of sort of some of the directions that we talk about. So, for instance, to promote a digitally inclusive community with literacy and skills able to access services and unlock new opportunities. So the language there is intended to kind of set that outcome, and then how that gets executed. That is ultimately that opportunity for council to kind of say, okay, well, that is something I think is right for us to pursue at this point in time. I can speak to the work the state government has done, if there's a published document, and move forward from there.
Thanks, Rory. Councillor Milligan.
Yeah, just one more matter I wish to raise. There was actually a very similar report done by David Abrahams in the 90s, which looked at capacity and possible opportunities both in the community and in industry. Have you had an opportunity to have a look at that?
That's not one that rings.
It was funded by the New South Wales Department of Regional Development. He's actually now the editor of our local paper. It's
Okay.
pretty easy to find.
Okay. Look, I would say there's certainly a lot of content around there, and indeed we ourselves have published a lot of, I'd say, kind of how-to manuals and frameworks, again, in our public sites that's available to support councils. We do a lot of work with other councils within this. I think where this was sort of unique and specific was that it was actually asking the question specifically on Port Central Coast.
Thank you. Councillor Wright, Councillor Moreland, anything? Don't see any hands up. Thank you very much. Rory.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, can I be clear on what the recommendation is?
We do have a recommendation out.
Deferred, and we just need to work out with Rory how we get the document to you in order to progress it, because there's some.
Yeah, I moved a motion that we defer it until we receive a copy and are able to review.
So that'll come
Councillor
back to
Lundu?
the next meeting.
Or when it's available.
We have to work that out because there's some sort of containment around the document.
Yes. Again, I just want to be kind of really clear that, and I don't want there to be sort of the view of some secrecy. We just didn't, respecting this forum, it was very important for us to ensure that we've gone through a process, but something doesn't become published by going through this forum, if that makes sense.
We'll leave it up to the director when it comes back, as far as whether it's public or not. But we have a motion in front of us from councillor Neal, seconded by councillor Smith, that the committee defer this item until, we say, the 1st of July, but did you want to put a date on it?
I was going to say just until the document's available.
We might be able to circulate it out of session. I just need to have a conversation with Rory about the limitations.
Sure, but do you want a date up there or until the director?
That's the next.
For the next meeting, yeah.
Okay,
The next
so
meeting.
that's fine.
So sorry, Chair, but that doesn't clarify what the action is, other than the document gets circulated.
I don't think we have an action here. at
Okay,
all.
it's just for our information.
Yeah,
So we're not endorsing it to be published
No,
anywhere or anything
no.
like that.
Not at this point,
Right.
but the expectation will be that you will once you've read the document.
So we'll come back to a future meeting.
that's
Okay,
fine.
thank you.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. All those in favour of the motion? Unanimous. Thank you very much. The motion is carried. Thanks very much, guys. Move on to item 1.6, Central Coast Visitor Accommodation Futures Study and Development Action Plan. I invite Mel Smith, Director of Community and Recreation Services, to speak to the report.
We have the consultant that was engaged to conduct the report online, who's going to take us through a presentation.
Is that Mike, is it?
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Mike Rosini.
Okay, go Mike.
Okay, did you want me to share the report from my end, or does that occur at your end?
We've got it already.
We have it, Mike. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. I'll just bring it up. So you all have a copy of it. And the presentation, sorry, can I share the presentation?
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Can you all see that? Right. Yeah, so just presenting the outcomes of the visitor accommodation futures study for Central Coast. The study was first identified within the Central Coast Destination Management Plan and was looking to address some of the gaps in supply of visitor accommodation within Central Coast. One of the key issues facing the region from a visitor economy perspective is the low number of overnight visitors. The region primarily attracts day trippers, and overnights make up probably around 20% of overall visitation. So the gap was identified in the last Destination Management Plan, and this project has been developed to identify opportunities for investment in the region. Just in terms of the overview of what I'll be presenting, a bit on the background and context of the project, an overview of accommodation supply and demand, so really understanding what that looks like and also the underlying demand for investment. Talk briefly around the investment opportunities and then finish on some actions that will look to support investment in visitor accommodation in the region as well. Just an overview of some of the project objectives, just in terms of our project brief. Obviously understand the current future visitor accommodation needs across the region, identify some of those visitation and strategic, I guess, drivers of accommodation investment, really understanding that kind of landscape for investment in the region. Gaps in visitor accommodation supply, as I mentioned before, who are the key target markets that visitor accommodation investment should focus on. Identify the barriers to visitor accommodation development investment within the region, and then also provide recommendations to resolve some of those barriers, and then also actions to promote that investment, particularly within the economic development unit. So just the way we've kind of approached this project, we've looked at developing a bit of a sub-regional approach to the Central Coast, particularly in terms of investment, and we've also followed a similar pattern with the destination planning work we're also undertaking in Central Coast, just acknowledging, I guess, the vast difference in the region in terms of tourism product, Also the level of development across different areas within Central Coast, and also acknowledging the various different types of visitor markets that come to the region as well. So we've really tried to, I guess, focus on investment opportunities across each of the identified sub-regions. So we've got a region for Gosford and surrounds, the entrance and Northern Lakes, the Peninsula area, the headlands, Wyong and Tuggerah, and also the hinterland. Some of those colours I just noticed are mixed up.
Yeah, the colours don't actually match.
Yeah, I just realised that then. You guys know the region, so you obviously know where those locations are. So just in terms of what makes a destination attractive to accommodation investors, so it really helps us understand, I guess, what this study needs to look at. So some of the key things would include, high visitor volumes and strong market performance, of which Central Coast, ticks the box quite well. It has over 5 million visitors per annum, one of the highest visited local government areas in Australia. Located in proximity to amenities and attractions, and there's obviously a wealth of product that drives visitation. Located adjacent to key drivers of business travel. So the business market is really key to attracting some of those larger scale investments, particularly in sort of hotel facilities. And you'll find that, Gosford and Wyong are probably quite well placed to attract investment that supports that business travel market. Supported by a large population base and skilled labour force, with 350,000 residents in the region. It does have quite a substantial labour force to support investment. Located in areas with low existing competition, that's certainly a tick for the region given the current supply. We did find it was quite dated. A lot of the accommodation hasn't seen a lot of reinvestment, even the accommodation that's existing over the last 15 years. And then land availability and governance as well. So we've also looked at that. Land availability is probably a tougher one in the Central Coast with constraints on obviously greenfield sites, but there is opportunity for reinvestment in existing built up areas as well. Just in terms of visitation, as I mentioned, around 5 million, over 5 million visitors to the region, 1.8 million overnight visitors and 4.5 million visitor nights. Expenditure, almost around 1.5 billion in the region. So it's a substantial part of the overall economy, with the average length of stay around 2.5 nights. And we've had a look at some of the sub-regional visitation across those regions I've presented before, and there's obviously some areas that have high levels of visitation. The entrance has particularly high levels of holiday leisure visitation. Gosford and also Terrigal and the Peninsula are also pretty high in terms of the level of visitation to those areas. But it just shows that there is quite a dispersed level of visitation across the region. That hinterland area definitely has, I guess, a lower supply of visitors than some of the coastal areas, but evidence shows that has been developing over time. In terms of accommodation supply and demand, we've had a look at what we've called commercial accommodation, so things like hotels, resorts, motels, serviced apartments within the region. And then also what we've called private accommodation, so really a kind of Airbnb type accommodation. The key, I guess, points I want to draw here are the number of rooms in what we've called commercial accommodation, being 2,700 guest rooms in the region. But then you can also see the overwhelming number of rooms in private accommodation at 10,200. So a vast majority of your current supply is actually within private houses, and a lot of those are things like holiday rentals spread through the region. So you do have that really large supply of houses that support overnight visitation. And there's some, I guess, positives and negatives around that. And it does create issues in terms of things like worker housing, etc. But it is also important in terms of its support for overnight visitation. Some of that may have also been developed more so over the last sort of 5 years as demand has kind of increased. And with the lack of investment in commercial accommodation, basically opening the door for that market to grow as well. So some of the supply gaps, one of the things that was noticeable was the lack of accessible rooms. Probably leads to a note around the, I guess, the quality and aging accommodation stock as well. Opportunity to look at development of more accessible accommodation within the region. Luxury offerings were pretty low. There's a few high quality, smaller scale accommodation offerings, but overall, the luxury accommodation sector is quite small within Central Coast. Most of it would be considered kind of mid or lower level in terms of the quality ratings. Branded hotel and motel chains. Again, there's some recognisable offerings there. A number of the motel chains are quite dated and need of reinvestment as well. The other one is just that experiential accommodation, and there's definitely been a growth across Australia, is the development of things like eco accommodation, etc., which drivers of and motivators of visitation, and also help brand the region as well, particularly around the sort of the ecotourism elements that the region's trying to promote. So there's definitely a sort of a lack of accommodation within that space as well. Just on accommodation demand, so what we've done is had a look at forecast visitation and then translated that into accommodation needs. So based on historic growth trends and also the COVID recovery rates, there's a couple other notes there missing, but projected around 1.65 million visitors from 2024 to 2034. Overnight visitors in the region. So what we've been able to do is take that and identify the number of rooms required to support that future growth. And then obviously there's a need for a substantial amount of investment to deliver to that forecast accommodation. Some of that will be delivered through things like Airbnb properties, but there's certainly a key role for commercial accommodation to be invested in the region. We also had a look at a number of other demand indicators. So we had a look at room rates, and we found that the room rates within the region are much higher than the average for regional New South Wales. It had the fourth highest average room occupancy within the top 11 regions within New South Wales as well. And then it also had the highest average room rate of the top 11 tourism regions in New South Wales. So there's some strong indicators that demand is pretty solid in the region, and then potentially supply is not actually meeting those demand levels when you start to look at the room rates for the region. So just in terms of the projected room requirement, as I mentioned, we looked at a number of different growth scenarios based on those forecasts I presented before. If we take the mid growth scenario, we're looking at around 2,000 additional rooms required to 2035. So, and we've used that as a bit of a benchmark for identifying that the stock of accommodation required to meet that future demand. It could be as low as 1,000, it could be as high as 3,000, but we've picked that midpoint scenario around 2,000 guest rooms. So some of the investment opportunities identified in the region, and we've had a look at some qualitative data and also quantitative data taken across Australia around preferences for accommodation typology. So you'll find that as I mentioned, a lot of the accommodation stock within the region is quite dated, but also, it's kind of targeted to an audience maybe from sort of 20 or 30 years ago, particularly with the large number of motel accommodation. There's obviously a lot of caravan and tourist parks, but what's missing is that really contemporary accommodation supply. So if we apply kind of current day needs and preferences for accommodation, we've been able to identify the projected requirement across different typologies of accommodation. So, investments required in luxury upscale hotels, so more of your five-star hotel market. There's still requirement for further investment in tourist parks and cabin accommodation. There's certainly a big gap, particularly in that eco accommodation within the region. That could occur in coastal areas, but also potentially in the hinterland area as well. Self-contained apartments continues to be a big growth area and a popular preference for visitors. Resorts, again, farm stay, particularly in the hinterland, as I mentioned before, but then also some of that experiential accommodation around health and wellness retreats as well. So that's looking at I guess the broader accommodation typologies required in the region. If you have a look at motel and motor inns, there's actually an oversupply of that accommodation typology based on current preferences. So there is an opportunity for those motels to potentially reinvest in their facilities to make them, I guess, more contemporary in their offer. So the key, I guess, opportunities that we've identified as targets for investment, and this is really focused on some of those, I guess, larger scale investment opportunities, internationally branded luxury upscale hotel, health and wellness spa and retreat, ecotourism resort, beach resorts, of which you've got a couple, but there is that continuous demand for that type of product. Self-contained apartment hotel, and also further investment in tourist parks as well. And some of these can be located within sort of existing urban areas. Others are more suited to more of your greenfield sites like the ecotourism resort and also tourist parks. So there will be some requirement for some review of some planning within the local environment plan to see what can be supported within those two sectors. So that's just an overview of what we've identified as the key opportunities, and then I'll move towards the action plan. So there's two strategic directions identified within the action plan. The first one is to facilitate investment in new and aging accommodation product aligned to the needs of Central Coast, and there's a number of actions in there, primarily for the business economic development unit to lead on. And one of the key things is to really promote the opportunities that are identified in this plan and demonstrate the council's open for business. So the first one there is an action around the preparation of accommodation prospectus, which is basically the end point of this project. But then also looking at ways to promote that through council's media channels, but then also working directly potentially with investors in the accommodation sector. So the first three there are really around the development of the prospectus, promotion of it, but then also doing some direct contact with accommodation investment and investors and developers, really identifying those opportunities and presenting a strong pitch to those groups. The fourth one there is to undertake a forum which presents this study to existing and potential investors as well. So really just tapping those investors. They could be investors within the region, or they could be from some of the capital cities looking to invest in I guess, peri-urban areas. The fifth one there again is to do some more direct contact with investors. The sixth action is around the development of a guide for reinvestment in motel accommodation stock, including a model for reinvestment and case studies. Number 7 is to undertake a forum of motel owners across Central Coast. And then also number 8 is to investigate potential for a small scale grant program as well. So they're the key actions identified for the economic development unit. And then if we move to strategic direction 2, it's really around de-risking investment in accommodation in Central Coast. So identifying ways to support investment further. The first 4 actions there are really for the strategic planning unit to take up. Action 1 is to undertake discussions with the department regarding practice notes. So there's a tourism practice note within the current planning area within state government that needs to be updated, and it's quite dated. So looking at developing some new material in relation to that. Consider recommendations of the Visitor Accommodation Futures Project as part of any future review of the local strategic planning statement. So really making sure that the needs and opportunities identified within this report are also considered with any future strategic planning. Ensure that visitor accommodation investment is considered within the rural land strategy. So I understand that that's a project that's about to be undertaken within Central Coast. And it's really about providing guidance for investment in particularly the hinterland areas and what that looks like. So, it could be, projects like eco accommodation projects, for example. The fourth one is review of the LEP and DCP provisions to investigate opportunities for small-scale accommodation in rural and environmental zones. So we did have a look at the zones across the region, and also had some pretty in-depth discussions with the strategic planning team. The key areas for barriers for investment in accommodation was really in those rural environmental zones. So there's an action here which really talks to a review of those areas to see what can be done to support further investment in tourist accommodation. The commercial zones and also residential zones are pretty open to hotel and motel accommodation development. For the market and tourism team, 2.5 is continue to support business events. So it's really making sure that business events is on the radar for Central Coast, and making sure that council supports the business events sector in that space. So working with Business Events New South Wales to promote venues, but then also support for accommodation investment that also has business event venues as well. It's seen as a critical, I guess, sector for supporting particularly that midweek visitation across Central Coast.
That's right. Thank you, Mike. I think we'll take it from here.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Were there any questions for me?
That's okay. The staff will take them. Thanks, Mike.
Okay,
Thank
no
you.
worries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Okay, so yes, done. So questions to the staff, okay, not the presenter.
Yeah, if there was the starting point of the study was that there would be an increase of 1.6 million visitors from 2024 to 2034. I couldn't really see what the basis of that was.
I would say I've seen many targets, and they're talking about 2035, and it always comes up with about 14 million nights per year as the target. At the moment, we're about half that.
It wasn't a target, that was a forecast, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I was just wondering.
Well, exactly.
He would have based that information from the Tourism Research Australia in terms of incoming visitors and to regions and visitor nights, and then he would have forecast what they think that growth would
It
be.
didn't have any basis in the report. I felt
I'll have a look for you.
unconvinced, truthfully.
Yeah. But it's a big target considering it's really doubling what we've got now,
Correct, yeah.
and that's 10 years. The biggest accommodation you can see there is Airbnb at 2,700 of them, and 8,000 nights or whatever it is. One thing that interests me is we had a look at the revenue generating council assets, and the holiday parks is doing very well, but it appears to me that it would be good if we had more holiday parks, because we're going to have more people going to holiday parks. So I don't know where we produce those out of thin air.
You can probably expand existing ones to some extent.
Yeah. And the other question was around the eco/farm stays and the DAs required, and what is the assessments that everybody out in the valleys and the hinterlands would have to go through to create some farm stays and eco villages out there. I don't know if we're up to date on whether it will be a good thing for them to do that or a quick thing for them to do that, but certainly that's a lot of area.
I think there's a lot of people who believe that the green space in the hinterland should be retained for
Agriculture.
and not be.
But on the other hand, we've got all the agricultural farms saying that they need people coming and staying, not only for tourism, but also for working on the farms.
There has been an exponential growth in agritourism, and it's certainly an emerging market. And part of what the rural land strategy will do, will look at how do they enable that to happen for properties on the Central Coast if they're interested in doing. I think they're trying to basically look at how do they, I suppose, monetize what they're delivering in terms of their normal agricultural product, but also how can they actually enhance that and get, I suppose, return on their investments. But there's opportunities, but certainly part of the rural land strategy, Shannon can talk to that
in relation to what we can do to enable that to happen. There has been some changes in the Planning Act to actually support that from a New South Wales perspective, but I leave that to Shaq.
Yeah, so yeah, we'll definitely be looking at that balance of the primary use of agricultural land versus tourism as well. But we do get a lot of inquiries for kind of like a lot of people come talking about like saddles at Mount White, like that kind of.
It's not a bit of a range.
Yeah, yeah, we do get a lot of inquiries, but yeah, it is that, you know, agricultural land's important.
Okay, well, let's watch that. But Councillor Millen's got his hand up. Yes.
I was really disappointed with this whole report. I've sent 2.5 pages to questions to the director. I suppose my biggest concern is I'm not sure how much we paid this consultant, but we haven't really touched on the core reasons for the lack of investment. If you look at page 4 of the executive summary, it clearly states the key barriers to accommodation investment includes long and complex planning processes, limited transport, service infrastructure, land supply constraints, seasonality, and cost barriers to entry. And it's repeated throughout the report. We got major issues not allowing or not encouraging investors to invest in this type of accommodation. Now, I'm glad the consultant's still not on the line. I'm really shocked. The key recommendation is to produce a glossy prospectus, encourage more people to have to come across the same barriers. I'm just lost with this whole process. And I know the directors will come back to me with some answers to my questions, but I just don't understand what the intent was of getting somebody to clarify what most of us already knew. There's a ton of opportunities for our region, but we do need to remove those barriers that's stopping people investing on the Central Coast. So if the director can give me some response, I'd really appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor. Director.
Thank you, Councillor Millen. As we have previously discussed, this report was commissioned before I sort of took over this portfolio. So I may need to defer to Andrew to respond to some of those questions.
Questions been said.
I think it's just between Councillor Millen and the director by the sound of that.
Councillor Millen, would you like to ask your specific questions and I'll ask Andrew to respond?
I won't go through all of them because I don't want to hijack the whole meeting, but I'd like to know how much we paid this consultant to undertake this work.
The total cost of the project was $79,800.
Okay, thank you for that. So my second question was, again, page 4 of the executive summary clearly identifies the barriers to investment. So what work are we actually doing to address those barriers?
I had a discussion with the consultant with regard to your questions, Councillor Merland, and he said they are onerous and fairly symptomatic across most of the country at the moment in terms of infrastructure, lack of plugged-in employment lands, issues with transportation. The fact, and most investors and developers say that, you know, the New South Wales Planning Act and the process to actually get to an investment for accommodation development is quite a hard one as well. I would note that, you know, council staff are working in a number of areas. You know, the planning unit is undergoing a benchmarking piece of work to look at optimising, enhancing the flow of DAs through the system. The state government is currently preparing an integrated transport strategy. We had that as one of our actions to complete a council one at the moment. We've deferred that in this year's operation plan because we want to have that sage conversation with the state government in terms of what their directions are in terms of addressing the transportation and intermodal issues within the region. And the Economic Development Committee received last month the draft employment land strategy as well, which talks about challenges in terms of the lack of available unconstrained infrastructure-enabled employment lands on the Central Coast as well. Strategic Plan is also working on a commercial land strategy as well across town planning, town centres and districts as well. So there's a number of pieces that are happening that talk to what will be really a long-term conversation about trying to manage these inherent and endemic issues with regard to investing in most locations across the country.
And so, Councillor Merlin, maybe you could send the questions to all of the councillors to see what you're asking the director.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. Just before we finish, I'm really concerned about releasing a glossy prospectus, especially to investors both locally and investors outside our region. I think they would see it as a little bit of a joke at the moment. They know how hard it is to do make investments here on the Central Coast. I don't think we'll get any support from our key stakeholders without having some type of process in place to addressing and de-risking investment in accommodation in our region.
Thanks,
And I'll leave it
Councillor.
there. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. And look, respect Councillor Merlin's got some points there that I'm very interested in having a look at. I guess just, yeah, I probably don't feel ready to endorse this at this point in time. I was interested, correct me if I'm right, the focus of this is about the commercial accommodation side, which I think is a good thing because I think it's lacking on the Central Coast. I guess I just wonder how that interplays with the whole Airbnb sector. And again, without sort of having the data in front of me, I do think that it's benefits in shifting away from the Airbnb, certainly in terms of our affordable housing elements on the Central Coast. And I just wonder how much that would play in the risk for investors. If Airbnb is sort of booming and continues to boom, does that present a risk for investment in the area in terms of those commercial accommodation styles? And should we be looking at that like that alongside this at the moment, I guess is the question, or are we doing that at the moment? Because I know some councils are taking steps in terms of just managing that Airbnb sector a little bit better. So is that something we're doing, and how does that interplay with what we're talking about today, I guess?
That's a very insightful and very smart question. And the organisation, our officers have done a whole lot of work in this area with regard to government inquiries with regard to it. We actually have 3,500-ish Airbnb properties and short-term stay accommodations, and we measure all the data on them. On average, they have an occupancy rate of between 20 and 30%, getting up to a high of around 40% of key seasonal times across the calendar. And what we've assumed as part of this process, but it's based on the data, is essentially this is a whole lot of Sydney-siders who have the second property up here who occasionally rent it out to cover some of their running costs along the way. And the cost per night for an Airbnb property on the Central Coast is higher than the Gold Coast, the Sunshine Coast, Byron Bay. It's like in the top 2 or 3. So they actually use it to essentially create some revenue to manage the ongoing rates and water and other costs along the way. So it's there, it's large, but it doesn't actually play quite a significant impact.
Well, when you say impact, it's got a huge impact on noise for neighbours. I tell you, Councillor Eaton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I must say I agree with Councillor Merlin. You know, to me, the biggest issue we've got is the lack of planning support, but particularly for existing resorts. So, I mean, there's 2 obvious ones, and everyone will know one, the Lago. We all love to see a Lago redeveloped, I think, into something. It's a terrible situation at the moment. And yet, you know, when they tried to do it some years ago, not under this council, they were knocked back. The height limit's quite restrictive now. I know of another one who's been talking to me, which is not a problem resort, but he would like to expand it. It's the older resort now called something else. He's very interested in making it into bring it up, but there's no real system to enable that. So, I mean, I would suggest that particularly for existing sites that can be upgraded, we need to have some sort of plan for them and be able to work with them to get those, that happening. Because that's the easy stuff, isn't it? Seems to me that's the easy stuff. We've already got to, you've already got some sort of accommodation there, and these people are wanting to do something.
I'm a bit confused why there's no plan. I mean, isn't it the normal plan? If they have a DA, they go to the planning department, they get pre-guidance on their DA, they lodge a DA. I'm not quite sure what you mean.
There's no particular encouragement. If this is a sector we want to encourage,
Incentivise.
then, should they have a person that they can talk to about it? I mean, both of those, Alago's got height issues now, and the other ones, I think, and I don't know if Shannon, you know the details of it, I think it's some sort of old existing, which can be, of course, extended. It doesn't need a rezoning, just needs a DA, I think, to continue to existing use. But it's not a straightforward. Neither side is straightforward in terms of trying to develop, and I suspect that's the case with many existing sites. They're kind of developed, and then to redevelop it is quite difficult.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Eaton. Councillor Moreland, last question, and then we'll see what we want to do with the recommendation.
It's more of a statement, Chair, in relation to Councillor Eaton's last comments. Page 6 of the executive summary nominates a strategic direction called Strategic Direction 1, facilitate investment in ageing accommodation product. So exactly the examples that Councillor Eaton gave. And my question back to the director is, what is council doing to accommodate this? Because there was nothing in the report.
Okay, I understand. So if you send your questions around, that'll be great. Sounds like the director's coughing away here, but that should have answers from Andrew as well to those questions. To the members, what do you want to do with this recommendation? It doesn't sound like you want to move ahead with what we have. Are we deferring to the next meeting or the meeting after, depending on how long these questions?
Helpful is if we can come to the next meeting with responses to the questions and look at how we move forward with it.
Okay, so do you want to have any recommendation out of this at all, or just wait for the director to put it on the
Unless you want
agenda?
to formally record that there'll be questions and answers, but I don't know if we necessarily.
No. Are you happy
Chair,
to?
I'm happy to move that.
Can I ask that we defer it to August?
We could lay it on. Why don't we lay it on the table?
Can I,
It's your favourite one.
can I add on just getting a bit more of an update on where council's managing Airbnb? And even though I know you said the figure, I can't remember what the figure was, but in my mind it went, oh, that could be
3,500.
3,500 rooms in a hotel somewhere, which I know isn't quite equivalent, but it just seems to me that there is an interplay there, and I'd like to know, we can bring that back.
I think from Councillor Moreland, this is deferred until the August meeting of the committee. And number two, that the response at the August meeting include Airbnb.
Well, just that maybe staff circulate an update on how Airbnb is managed in this.
Let's get some wording for that is the response.
Because one of the big issues about Airbnb is that
we don't look after fair trading does, so that's a problem.
But the rules have changed as well.
In terms of whether it requires a DA, there is some suggestion that running an Airbnb is actually a business, should require a DA, and we've never done that. Maybe we should think about that.
We can't do it. The planning legislation doesn't allow us to because it's exempt development, but the Department of Planning are doing a review because they get a huge amount of complaints from council.
We can bring all the information back.
That's just something I think we need to.
As compared to other MGAs.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion up there by Councillor Moreland, seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour?
CEO.
Unanimous? Thank you. We okay with that?
Yeah, we'll write it.
All right, so let's move on to 1.9 now. Nighttime Economy Action Plan. Now, recording that we've only got about 20 minutes left. So invite Mel Smith, Director of Community and Recreation Services, to speak to the report. We've handed it off.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll pick that one up. So, just briefly, basically, we had, council had adopted the discussion paper back in 2024. The team have gotten together and pulled together an action plan with some timelines about how we might execute that discussion paper. What's in front of the committee tonight. There's a couple of things that have actually been activated under the in the report. You'll see that there were a number of actions that have actually already been undertaken. As an example, some of those have been some of the work that's been undertaken by the Safer Cities Her Way project, which actually looked at some interventions within the Gosford CBD, and those were completed with the mainly streetscape and lighting upgrades and some street activations. Council continues to support the establishment of the Uptown Accelerator districts in Gosford and Terrigal, and that ongoing support, really including marketing their respective centres and promoting nighttime economy businesses. But each of those accelerated teams have got some work to do before they can come back to council in terms of what they're going to do under the funding that they receive from the state government. So there was a number of actions that have undertaken, but clearly what we're going to do for the next, from 2025 is investigate and implement the new business concierge service, and the development of a wayfinding concept and design plan for Gosford CBD. We'll also be looking at that continued support, as I said, around the Uptown Accelerator districts. But the other component of that, which is like a large proportion of the actions that are remaining in within the action plan to undertake, is really the special entertainment precinct for Gosford. They refer that, people call that a SEP, so I just didn't want to say SEP straight up, but that's probably
It's 1B SEP.
yeah, that's right. We also had some budget in this year to commence that process. Sorry, in 2026, in terms of doing some early engagement around acoustic consultants. One of the reasons we have to do that is to undertake some sound assessment works in what the impacts would likely be for a special entertainment precinct. I don't know all the ins and outs of doing a SEP, but Shannon does, and we were working very closely with the strategic planning team in relation to that. The challenges for the Central Coast was initially we weren't prepared for the grant funding process with the state government. We didn't have an identified area for that SEP, because you need to allocate where the boundaries are before you can apply for grant funding. So we missed out on the first round. We are having conversations with the state government to understand how we might be able to potentially fast track that process for the Central Coast, but we haven't really made too many inroads at this particular point. But there is a plan for us to certainly commence that project in 25-26.
Thank you very much. So give everybody an update on Thursday. Yep, I see there, Councillor Milland. On Thursday, I'll be doing a presentation to the UDIA, and one of the other speaker is the 24-hour commissioner who controls all of this. So while he's right there next to me, he will get asked in front of everybody for help. And I have the question that I need to ask him. So that's, straight to the commissioner. So that's good. Councillor Milland.
A question to the appropriate director, just on timeframes. I just can't believe that we're looking to undertake the trial in 2027. When you have a look at the number of councils that have already got their steps up and running, or at least running a trial, why is it taking us so long? I really don't understand.
A lot of the time's taken up with, because it requires an amendment to either council's local environmental plan, or in our case, the SEP, the double P, that has all of Gosford City Centre's planning controls in it. So it'd be required to work, I guess, either way, but with the Department of Planning as well, to get their legislation amended to allow us to have a special entertainment precinct. And the statutory process has a lot of steps, really, and that's what's taking up most of the time.
Okay, I understand that.
But I guess,
sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, the steps in a planning proposal are local planning panel, committee, council, have the minutes endorsed, to the Department of Planning to get a gateway determination issued, exhibition, back through the committee and council process, and then back to the Department of Planning for their finalisation. which is taking longer and longer at this point because the most of their resources are diverted to the delivery of housing. So recently, a lot of projects that would have taken us 3 or 4 months to get through the Department of Planning are taking us 12, 13, 14. And we need them to, do their end of the project. So, yeah, it's definitely longer at the moment than it has been, probably.
Thanks, councillor.
Yeah.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So very supportive of what's in there for Gosford. I'm a little bit more concerned about Terrigal though. And I can recall in the last term of council in one of our documents, all of a sudden it said 24-hour at Terrigal. There'd been no discussion, no consultation. Where is this coming from? Because it sort of popped up 4 years ago without anybody actually asking for it. So where's that come from?
Part of that's primarily driven by some of the businesses in Terrigal. They've formed together, as I said, under the accelerator program and put in a submission.
When did they form?
Well, I can't tell you that. You have the
Yeah,
date,
it's
sorry.
12 months ago. So
So this was 4 years ago that all of a sudden it popped up in a document. Nobody had been talking about it. So does anybody know where it popped up that long ago?
I can't answer that question.
Okay, and look, I guess, so I'm very interested in the late night element of Terrigal, but I'd have to say at that point where I raised it with people, they really raised concerns about safety, about the fact there wasn't a police station operating out there. And that was coming from
24 hours.
Yeah, that was coming from people that were concerned about that element of it. So I actually, while that's in there without a kind of a feeling of how that's developed and how we're consulting with that, I probably can't support it. I'm really keen on the Gosford stuff, but I just am really concerned about, that side of it, I'd have to say, that it hasn't been, well, I don't know where it came from and I'm very intrigued by that. And B, I don't feel like that we've fully canvassed all of those elements.
I understand that there's an internal working group and external working groups within the different areas. Is that right?
At the moment, there's an internal working group looking at that. So the priority has been given for Gosford in terms of the action plan. No progress has happened no progress is planned for Terrigal at this particular point. However, the businesses have applied through the state government for the accelerator program. Now, part of that accelerator program can look at a number of different actions, whether that could be the trading hours and how they might be able to attract people to come to their premises and their businesses to activate the place. But one of the things around safer precincts is when there's activation and there's people around, and that does certainly provides people a safer feeling in an environment when there's people around. But I hear your points, and it's not in the action plan to be progressing at this point. The only one that we are focusing on
It's listed there.
is
If you can see it listed there next to it. It's a 24-hour commissioner. Again, I'm supportive of late night.
I didn't say that.
I'm not supportive of the 24-hour.
Where are you? 24 hours, just, I think, late night, wherever. But I think last I heard, it was like 1 or 2 a.m. or whatever the number is. It's not 24 hours. Really. 25, I think it is.
I really haven't seen a reference to Terrigal.
It's in the table, so it's number 27.
27.
Ministry in the Office of the 24-Hour Commissioner to enrol businesses in the Uptown Accelerator Program. So again, I'm drawing a link where that link might not be there, but again, I'm drawing back on experience and knowledge and the good old days as a teacher of going around Terrigal and stepping over my students on the pavement the next morning. So I am quite concerned.
I think the actual action plan itself, item 27, also earlier on with the entertainment precinct, don't actually specify locations. Locations only come up in the final column, which is the comments. It doesn't mean, I assume that means it's speculation rather.
And we really haven't investigated that because we do not, like when you look at it, a lot of people, when they talk about 24-hour economy, isn't necessarily that's 24 hours in terms of operation. It can be up to 10 p.m. Like, I think part of that is the new norm seems to be that everything closes at 10 p.m. because most people are not looking for some of that late night, and it's appropriate in the right places, and it takes quite a bit of consultation with local communities as well in terms of that process. So yes, totally.
So what I was going to ask is, so the only areas that are being considered for late night operations are Terrigal and Gosford.
Can I clarify that? Because I think we're talking about areas as in, you know, numerous restaurants and bars or whatever. But there are many hotels that open late and, you know, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock.
What I'm asking the staff, John,
No, all
councillor, is what areas are actually being considered at all?
Yeah. In the initial discussion paper, they looked at, I think it was Ettalong, there was the entrance,
That's what I thought.
there was Gosford, and there was Terrigal, and I think they were the 4 that was considered. In terms of 24-hour economy, it's more, I liken it to more languages around late night economy, not necessarily always 24 hours, because we're not a 24-hour location. If you look at the City of Sydney, perhaps maybe that might 24-hour economy, you know, nighttime activation. But for us on the Central Coast, I think there needs to be some consideration around what that looks like in terms of the future for late night economy. And generally, I think that's about how we activate the local places that we have, and where is that considered to be okay and where they're not considered to be okay.
No, I certainly feel that there is room on the Central Coast for more activity in the evening, but we do obviously have to consider the
Okay, have we got any changes or making a motion out of the recommendation there? Councillor Smith, any changes? I know you.
Well,
It talks about DOPS and it talks about annual updates.
could we consider just amending it to note that further work needs to be done on any consideration of Terrigal? If that would be okay, since it's only Gosford and Terrigal that I mentioned.
Number 4, yeah.
Yeah. Further work and consultation.
Further work.
And consultation is to be done.
Councillor Merlin, Councillor Wright, any other? All good, all good. Consultation, excellent. Yep, that's it. Okay, so we have a mover. Councillor Neil.
Of what?
What's up there now?
The
Wonderful.
recommendations. I didn't move it. I thought Jane and.
Okay.
No, I'm not moving.
Councillor Merland.
You amended it.
No, I'm happy to move.
Councillor Merland's moving it. Councillor Wright's seconding. All those in favour? Councillor Neil? Your hand is down? Unanimous. Thank you. Move on very quickly to one of our business precinct. I know we added this as a standing item because of the importance of the location. Now 6:23. Will take long as an update. We've got one after, which is.
Yeah, we'd be able to do the Central Coast Air Show first.
Yes,
Because
we
it's already
can.
been deferred once, so.
Okay, understood. Okay, procedural motion. Councillor Smith, seconded Councillor Wright. All those in favour? Yes, unanimous. And so we'll move on to item 1.11 is the Central Coast Air Show, and going across to Shannon Turkington, Acting Director of.
Quick presentation. Bill?
Like me just to speak. Councillors, I hope you can all hear me from here. We did have a presentation for technical reasons, and in the interest of time, we'll keep it shorter. Councillors had the benefit of a confidential attachment, which I'm sure you've all read in relation to the last show. There's a considerable public enthusiasm on the day for the show, and there is considerable public interest in conducting another air show at Central Coast Airport. Obviously, the logistical and other issues need to be considered in that context. Central Coast Airport is an attractive venue for air shows, But as I said, it has logistical challenges. Its attraction is that it is close to major population centres and that it is uncontrolled airspace and that it has a perfect north-south runway for the purpose of running the event. And it's very, if you could say this, it's a very intimate air show as well. On the other hand, there is a lack of on-site parking. There is no scheduled public transport and there is no practical pedestrian access. So it is incredibly important in running the air show that issues of transport are addressed and also that issues of emergency access are addressed in any future air show. The air show has direct and indirect economic benefits. The direct economic benefits are relatively modest because a lot of the people who come just for the day and a lot of the operators come from out of the area. But there's a very strong indirect benefit. It showcases the region as an event venue. It showcases the region as a smart region because the air show is essentially about something smart, high technology, and because it lets people know that Central Coast is a presence in the aviation market. In considering a future air show, we need to be mindful that there is in fact a very small number of independent air show operators in Australia. The AMDA Foundation, which runs the Avalon Air Show, has taken over the Illawarra event, which is run at Shell Harbour Airport, and it also runs the other key event, New South Wales Temora, the Temora Air Show. There is another air show operator that runs the Gold Coast International Air Show, and that's a very big crowd pleaser. We've had the benefit of Paul Bennett air shows, and Paul Bennett has run the last couple of air shows and runs and contributes to the Avalon Air Show. Has a good safety record. He's an interesting person to work with. If we are going to proceed, we need to provide sufficient timetable to set up another air show. We've identified three key elements. The first is to select an air show operator, and that will take a little bit of time. It's been suggested that we should have an EOI so that we can look at not just the current operator, but other operators. And the key thing is to get whoever it is who's going to run the air show to sign an agreement on how the air show is going to run. Because obviously there are risks in air shows, and the last thing council wants to be left with is having to clean up after an unfortunate event, whether it's on ground or in the air. And unfortunately, as the recent Avalon Air Show shows, things can happen even with the best level of organisation. Second thing is we do need to go through the DA process. Council's able to make the approval, but it does require the consent of state authorities, and it does take time to get that consent. And those state authorities are absolutely concerned that there is adequate transport infrastructure on the day and adequate emergency arrangements. And the final thing is that there are some other approvals such as food and health and so on that need to be got. Accordingly, the staff recommendation is that on the basis that council would like to have another air show, that we allow sufficient time and that we look at the first half of 2027 as the time for another air show. From the point of view, I know it sounds funny, but from the point of view of the winds, which are so important, best months are March to May. Last year was really propitious. We had wonderful weather in May. We've recently been through some troublesome rain. So there is always a weather issue, but on the assumption that the weather is good, going late autumn is the best time for a show. I've simply provided this for information. It's clearly in the hands of councillors to determine the way forward.
Thanks very much, Councillor Smith.
Oh, thank you. So just two things. I note the recommendation from the last meeting has been modified at this meeting, in between meetings. On what basis and who?
Which section of it?
Well, there's, look, I mean, there's an additional 5, which is about keeping the confidential, and there's just some rewording of one part to say that we endorse, that recommend to council, the council endorses the CEO to proceed with something. One could argue that it was wordsmithing, but when we defer an item, on what basis does somebody then go and change the recommendation that was in the previous report?
With respect, the item has only been changed to take account of the fact that it's been moved from a confidential report, which was the assumption, or the driver of the last meeting was set up as a confidential report to be an open report. So that's why the additional items were
Now
added.
there's some changing to number 4.
I changed the recommendation just because it said that the council adopt, and I changed them to the committee recommends that, just to be consistent with all the council.
Okay, to me that's minor points, but significant process issue. If we've got
Just because they're
changing recommendations when we've deferred an item, that could have been changed now on the floor. So I'm very concerned about process around that, and I don't know how to express that more strongly or to.
Yeah, no, sorry, I just changed it because our original recommendation.
I don't have time to go and check every single item to see whether staff have changed it in between the last time we saw it. My second point is, why is that report confidential? I would like to see it released, even if the name of the company is removed. It was a damning report. It was an absolutely damning report that seemed to suggest to me that there were significant safety issues, not in the air, but certainly on the ground. So I will move an amendment that the confidential report be made available with identifying information removed.
I hear from the director. I asked earlier to the start, but I wasn't actually clear why the report was confidential, because I wasn't clear on that at all.
I have a question of why it was confidential, and if it was to be given to the public, what are the sections that need to be redacted?
We're talking about the confidential attachment.
Yes.
I think it contains material which I think needs to go through a legal review process before it's released, because I think there's material which refers adversely on people with whom council does business. And
I see the defamation concern.
And I don't want to utter those words because I do. Okay. I understand the need for an open process, but I think that the way it was written was not perhaps. How can I put it?
It was not.
Perhaps not sufficient regard was given to the fact that the report at some stage might be
internal review.
Yeah.
Yes. Through you.
Perhaps that if you were to include the words, suitable words, that after legal review and after necessary, should we say, removal of anything that may have
even if
adverse imputations. I do think that councillors have got the benefit of the full report, so that you can draw your own conclusions. That
understand.
The trouble is, even if you
in the interest of
identification,
understand.
it's still defamatory if you've identified.
Sorry, through you, Chair, if that's okay. Yeah, basically picking up on what I guess Councillor Smith has mentioned. I think it does make it quite difficult in terms of councillors here tonight, or perhaps even in the council meeting when it comes there, to have an open and honest discussion about matters, because it is clearly at the moment in confidential. Is there any option through you, Chair, to Director, for perhaps a councillor workshop into this matter, so that we can actually drill down into it a bit more, or certainly, the other issue around possibly being able to look at whether there's a way that, bearing in mind all that's been said, the document can become, more transparent.
Yeah, and I'd agree. Maybe before our next meeting, we might have half an hour to do a bit of a review prior in a bit of a workshop, so all councillors could come in and question.
Yes, sir. Look, the only suggestion would be that it be, if on a strictly confidential matter, because some commercial matters that councillors would probably want to be appraised of, and which might affect the way they wish to view this matter. But you can understand in open session, one has to be very careful.
Workshops are one of the few areas where you can.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I suggest that a number of, my voice is going to go again.
Yeah.
There's a number of council briefings booked in over the next 6 or so many.
We could do it before then.
A spot in there. For a
Yes.
workshop.
So I think the answer is yes, if everyone heard that, prior to one of the briefings. But if you just look, points 1 to 5 remain, and then that point, both of the points 1 and 2 become points 6 and 7. The original recommendation. Is that right, Councillor? Councillor Smith?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, 1 to 5, and then the others become 6 and 7. Got that? Thumbs up. Okay, we are out of time, everybody. Let's vote on the recommendations. Everybody understand where the recommendation is at the moment?
No, what's happening with 2? Is it there?
Point 1 to 5 is the original recommendation,
And then there's.
and then we've got 6 and 7 as the
Sorry,
last.
somebody else want to move it because I'll be voting against 1 to 5.
Understand. Councillor Milland, moving it. Like Councillor Wright is not there, he's dropped off. Councillor McNamara seconding it. Okay, points 1 to 5 are the original, and then points 6 and 7 is about after the legal review and also then holding a workshop.
Sorry, I think it's a bit of a contradiction because the idea of having the confidential workshop was so it would remain in confidential rather than so 2 and 3 are sort of contradictory. But I think we either
report be available.
If we release it, we don't need to have a workshop.
So maybe after meeting, instead of 2, after meeting, say with a view to releasing a document that summarises issues. The legal review.
That clarified.
So we don't actually make a decision to release it yet.
No.
No.
You take out the full stop and the.
So I might just assist the staff with
Okay.
that little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, because it may be that we can't.
It needs to be.
Councillor Milland, just
I think we can.
clarifying a couple of things there.
I'm happy with that, Chair, so.
Understand, thank you. Okay, all those in favour of what we have on the screen there at the moment, which is the original recommendations and the other 2 points. Councillor McNamara, Councillor Neal, Councillor Milland, those against, Councillor Smith. I declare it passed. Back to 1.10, which is Warnervale Business Precinct, Shannon Turkington, Acting Director of Environment.
It was more just for general information and reading. I guess there's some points in there
Yes.
to have a look at what's programmed over the next.
I'm happy to move the recommendation.
And it's standing item, so we can give you a.
Yes, thank you. And I think that's why we brought it in. It's something that's kind of there. It's the master plan, if you will, has been sitting on somebody's desk for a long time, and it's employment lands.
I'm
Okay,
happy to second, Mr. Chair.
okay, so moved Councillor Neal, seconded Councillor Merland. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Meeting comes to a close at 6:39. Thanks, everybody.
I'm just going to leave it here and then move. Yeah, I'm getting a sore neck here.
Yeah.
There's others. Yeah, it's all. I'm just going to leave it here.
You see that this maybe old farm got approved 3 days, 2 days, 3 days ago with the original planning. That's original planning.